Graph y equals inverse sine of negative 1/2 x on the interval -5 to +5. Before we do anything else, whenever you're dealing with inverse trig functions, you're dealing with restrictions. So remember that these are the restrictions for inverse sine, inverse cosine, and inverse tangent. So the inverse sine function is only valid on the right-hand side of a unit circle. So that's from positive pi over 2 to negative pi over 2. All right, so just keep that in the back of your mind. Now, look at the x values. It seems like the x values for all of these functions are the same. -2, 0, and +2. So I think the easiest thing to do would be to just substitute those three x values into the function and see what the y values should be. Okay, so for example, let's start with -2. If we put -2 into the function, what will the y value be? Okay, so if I put in -2, I'll do my work over here. This would be the inverse sine of -1/2 times -2. A negative times a negative is a positive, and half of 2 is 1. So this would be the inverse sine of 1. Now an inverse trig function is an angle. This is the angle whose sine is 1. So you're sort of asking yourself this: the sine of what angle is equal to 1? That's the question. And picture it. Picture the unit circle. Remember, sine is a y value on the unit circle. So which position has a y value of 1? Well, that's here. Y value is 1. The sine is 1. But that angle is pi over 2. Okay, so the inverse sine of 1 is pi over 2. So that should be the y value. Okay, let's try 0. If I substitute, okay, so we're doing an x value of 0. If I substitute in 0, 0 times anything is 0. So that's just going to give me the inverse sine of 0. Okay, so this is an angle. This is the angle whose sine is 0. In other words, you should be asking yourself the sine of what angle is equal to 0. Well, okay, there's more than one of those. Okay, the y values are equal to 0 here and here. Okay, so how do I choose? Well, that's why we have restrictions, because you're not allowed to have more than one answer to a function. So we have to stick to the right-hand side of unit circle. Okay, so we can forget about this one. So it's got to be this one. But this angle is simply 0. So the y value will be 0. Okay, let's do the last one. Let's do +2. Okay, so if I substitute +2, that will be the inverse sine of -1/2 times +2. Half of 2 is 1. A negative times a positive is a negative. So this will be the inverse sine of -1. So this is the angle whose sine is -1. So you should be asking yourself the sine of what angle is equal to -1. All right, here, sine is a y value. The y value is -1 right here. Do not call this 3 pi over 2, by the way. You need to stick to the right-hand side. If you say 3 pi over 2, you're going out into the illegal area and back. So we can only go from here to here and no further. We're not allowed to go like this. That's too far for the restrictions. So if we think of it this way, this is negative pi over 2. And that's what you have to call it, negative pi over 2. Okay, so these are the 3 points we get. Now, let's see if they match. So, -2 should be positive pi over 2. Okay, and if this is pi, then, pi over 2 is like right in the middle. So if I go to -2, I should be at positive pi over 2. There's nothing there, so this is not the answer. Okay, so look at B. Well, one of the points is 0, 0. So there's nothing here at 0, 0. So that's not it. There's nothing here at 0, 0 either, so that's not it. So I already know that the answer is going to be C. But let's follow through and check everything. So -2, pi over 2. That makes sense. All right, pi over 2 should be right here in the middle. 0, 0. There it is. +2, negative pi over 2. +2, negative pi over 2. This is negative pi over 2 right here. It all matches. The answer is definitely C. But let's check the official answer. So there you go.